So is this a matter of the town not having the kind of access to medical care that perhaps they need?
Actually, earlier in the week, health officials were in the area to do the vaccine rollout of the over 60s in this town of Kliprand. And it was then that they discovered the staggering number of infections. So the town has a population of about 205, and out of those 205 people, 30 people have tested positive for the virus. When we visited the town yesterday, it was quite a sad scene to see that most residents have been quarantined. In fact, you can say that the entire town is now in isolation and they have to remain in quarantine at least until next week. That vaccine rollout now has also been postponed because when officials were in the area and discovered these high number of infections, they then decided to test as many residents as possible and also conduct screening so that next time they come back, which is supposed to be later this month after that quarantine period is over, then they at least know this is how many over 60s there are, this is how many vaccines we need to bring, because this town is quite isolated. It took us about 2.5 hours driving from the nearest town, Vredendal, which is where we are, driving from that town to Kliprand, and luckily we had a bakkie which made the drive a bit easier. It's a dirt road, much of the road is a dirt road, so for this reason the town is quite isolated. And one family member who we spoke to who lost his father to COVID-19 in this week, he mentioned that if they had been closer to a hospital, because there's only a satellite clinic in the town, if they'd been closer to a hospital, maybe his dad could have had a fighting chance, could have had the chance to get much needed oxygen, because his dad was a diabetic. So quite a devastating news for the entire town, who thought that COVID would never reach them, because they've been able to evade a first wave, a second wave, and now the third wave has hit them extremely hard. They've already lost 3 people, and the fear is that they may lose more.
All right, so of course, Monique, before we get to the story that you had put together for us, anything that we've heard from the government officials about this town?
So Western Cape Health Department says it's not uncommon for us to be seeing a town of this size having such high number of infections, because as I mentioned before, community members didn't think the virus would ever reach them, and residents were even telling me they weren't wearing masks. People were visiting one another because it's such a close, tight-knit community. There was physical contact between residents, because once again they never thought the virus would reach them until it did. And this week was particularly devastating, losing 3 residents in a close-knit community like this. The Western Cape Health Department says it will be providing the necessary help and support. The Matsikama municipality, which this town is situated in, also saying they will provide help. Yesterday when we were there, we already saw many donations of food and other supplies reaching this isolated community, because the shops are closed there, which means that for the next week and a half, for these 2 weeks, they are cut off. They're not allowed to leave their homes. They're not allowed to leave the town. So these type of donations are going to be desperately needed, especially by members who have the symptoms, who are sick. Right, but let's take a look at the story that we compiled.
Of course.
The only way into Kliprand is on one of these dirt roads. And if you are fortunate enough to have a bakkie, like we do, it'll take you about 2 hours, 2.5 hours from driving from Vredendal, which is the closest town. But if you don't have a bakkie, chances are it'll take you a lot longer than that. Now, not only is Kliprand isolated, as it's quite far from its closest town, Vredendal, but right now, due to COVID-19, it's also in isolation, as many of the citizens have been forced to stay in the town.
Kliprand is shut down. 30 of its 205 residents have tested positive for the virus. That's nearly every one of the 40 households here. 3 people have died and families are reeling after suddenly losing loved ones to a virus they never thought would hit their small town.
Mense wat van Kliprand is, maar wat buite kan die dorp is, het dit opgedoen, maar die mense self in Kliprand nie. So dit is nogal vir ons 'n groot skok om definitely te realize dat die virus is nou hier en dis werklik en dit is 'n eie dorpie, dit is ons eie mense.
The closest town where there are supermarkets and a hospital is Vredendal, about 2.5 hours away. Oga's mother and siblings also have COVID-19. He believes if help was nearer, his dad may still have had a fighting chance.
So ek dink as hy dalk nog nader in die hospitaal was, kan hulle dalk nog 'n klein bietjie gehelp het met suurstof en as dit sy tyd was om te gaan, dan aanvaar ons dit letterlik so.
There's very little here, and for most of the day, the small dorp resembles a ghost town because residents are quarantined in their homes until next week. As for supplies, these are virtually non-existent too because the only shops in town are closed, which means donations of food and other supplies are desperately needed.
That's why groups like the United Reformed Church from Vredendal, the closest town to Kliprand, are stepping in. This church has also been hard hit by COVID-19, losing 7 of its members over the past 2 weeks.
Het ons gehoor van Kliprand en op die manier het ons arms en hande uitgesteek na ons skoolhoof Ari Kloete hier en van ons gemeentelede, familielede hier en gevra wat gaan julle doen?
The situation has been a wake-up call for many residents of the rural town.
Ons het mos heeltyd geglo ons sal die maskers dra nie. Ons het heeltyd sonder maskers hier geloop omdat ons geglo dit sal nou nie hier gebeur nie. En ewe skielik hier sit. Ons moet nou permanent maskers dra, want dit het nou vir ons plat geslaan.
The Matsikama municipality says this region was the first in the Western Cape to be hit by the 3rd wave. While it's concerned about Kliprand's situation, it has plans in place to help.
Daar's baie kos reeds en medisyne en ander hulpmiddels as ook die ontsmettingsmiddels, die sanitizers. Het ons alles nou bymekaar gemaak en ons het dit by die toerisme kantoor afgevee.
The Provincial Health Department says Kliprand was scheduled for its vaccine rollout this week. But with the staggering number of infections, it's had to be postponed to later this month when the town is out of quarantine. Monique Mortlock, Kliprand.